At&T. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And it's the 30th of May. We're recording this today. We'll go out tomorrow. What was happening in, let's do it, 1939, 30th of May, doesn't matter. 1940, 30th of May. We're in middle of Dunkirk, aren't we?
Middle of Dunkirk, yeah.
1941, 30th of May. What's happening?
They're gearing up for, it's Crete, obviously.
Yes, Crete. Okay, 30th of May, 1942, Gazala Line battle.
Yeah.
30th of May, 1943.
Not a lot, actually, because not in the West, anyway, because Dams Raiders has happened a couple of weeks before.
There you go. 30th of May, 1944, Eve of Overlord.
Overlord.
And
also Rome about to fall.
Yeah, and 30th of May, 1945, it's finished. Nothing of interest. Well, there you go. There's our anniversaries roundup. But really, Jim...
Quickfire, I like that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a bit of quickfire, is there? But really, we've a lot to talk about because I'm not footsore. Funnily enough, I'm sort of mind sponge sore because last week, if you've been following us on our socials, as key influencers,
we made a trip to the Netherlands.
We made a trip to the Czech Netherlands, and we had a great time in Nijmegen and Arnhem.
And we crushed many bridges.
And so basically, last week, James and I went on a trip with Tripsmiths and 45. Is it 45 in total?
45.
45 of our listeners.
Keen punters.
Keen punters. And we did the decision at Nijmegen, I think would be what you call day one, because we went in the morning and we got there sort of after lunch. So we did decision in Nijmegen.
Looked at the Grave Bridge.
Yeah, looked at the Grave Bridge.
Looked at the drop zones for 82nd Airborne, drop zone O, E.
Yeah. And then we went to the pub.
Went to the Blue Hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Which looked just as I remembered it.
Yes, and that was...
Once I got my bearings.
Yeah, once you got your bearings, once we were up at the top. I mean, the interesting thing is, I don't know what your general impression is, dear listener, of Holland, the Netherlands. It's flat. But we went up and down hills for 4 days, didn't we, basically?
We did, and we kept saying it literally every 20 minutes. Of course, it's flat in Holland.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary that of all the bits of Holland to land in. But anyway, that Grave Bridge, that is quite an extraordinary story, isn't it? That they essentially coup de main that bridge.
They did. I think let's just do very, very, very quick recap.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was that there were 3 divisions dropped.
Yeah.
The southernmost was 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, Band of Brothers, all the rest of it. And they were down there in the Eindhoven neck of the woods.
Yes.
And so they're the first people to open up a passageway for 30 Corps who are starting on the Dutch-Belgian border and driving a 64-mile thrust roughly northwards.
Yes.
And there's all these rivers they've got to get across. So Eindhoven is the first sort of confluence of rivers, not least the one at Zon.
Yep.
And then the second lot is around Nijmegen.
Yeah.
And that's where the 82nd All-Americans are dropping.
Yeah.
Under our friend of the show, General Jim Gavin.
Gavin, yeah.
And then, of course, it's Arnhem and the British 1st Airborne Division.
Yeah, yeah.
So...
And Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade.
Yes. And, of course... And the 82nd Airborne, the southernmost bridge that they've got to capture is the one at Grave, which is the largest in Europe at the time. The longest, I should say. Yeah. And they do it by this fascinating coup de main operation by dropping a company, Company E, Easy Company, of the 1st Battalion of the 504th, on the southern side.
Yeah.
And the bulk of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment of 3 battalions to the north east of the Grave Bridge on what's known as Drop Zone O, or Oscar.
Yeah. I mean, what's fascinating about it, though, is that that's a parachute coup de main. People who've read about Arnhem and talked about Arnhem, or Market Garden, rather, often say, well, why not glider coup de main, all that sort of stuff. But what the 82nd there do is a completely effective parachute coup de main, where they land in a field, 200 meters from the bridge itself, and take it in an instant before anyone has time to basically pull up their trousers and get off the toilet. I mean, it's the It's the most extraordinary thing. And that bridge is so imposing and so vast, and it's the same bridge as it was in 1944, that you do get a sense of how important it is to the whole operation. And that's one of the interesting things about it, is that it's one of the bridges that Jim Gavin elects to seize at H hour on that operation. Whereas, of course, there's another bridge, which we've talked about. I mean, if you're a regular listener,
it is really interesting. And one of the reasons why they get this absolutely so quickly is because Lieutenant Rocco Johnson, who's one of the platoon commanders in Easy Company of the first, second 504th.
Yeah.
He has the foresight to realise that the green light has come on a little bit too soon and they're over buildings. And so he gives it a few.
Yeah.
And then jumps. And so consequently, they land in the polders, in the flat fields north of the town of Grave.
Yeah.
And really close. And we overlooked those fields, didn't we? We were there. We could see it. It was a sort of largely, one would imagine, an unchanged landscape. And that was very interesting. And it really was, a couple of 100 yards southwest of where the southern end of the bridge was.
Very Pegasus Bridge reminiscent.
Yes, the difference, of course, is that unlike Pegasus Bridge, that is not on the front line. That's not on the Atlantic Wall equivalent. No. There's no defence line there. Yeah. So although there is a really, really rudimentary defence of all the bridges, it is absolutely rudimentary, because the front line for the Germans is down on the Belgian border, where 30 Corps are about to set off. That's the front line, as it were. And there's nothing much in between, except that around Arnhem, unfortunately, 2 SS Panzer Corps is sort of getting itself together and regaining its balance and bringing in new recruits and so on. And then at Nijmegen, you've also, to the east, you've got the Reichswald and Cleve and Goch, just inside the German border, where there are also troops, albeit, again, very rudimentary troops. And it is troops from the 406th Infantry Division, which has been hastily cobbled together from odds and sods and stragglers and training battalions and replacement battalions and Volksgrenadiers and all the rest of it. Really, really kind of third, fourth tier troops. If that, who've been
digging ditches and stuff as well as trying to exercise, so they're all exhausted as well. So
and under-equipped, operating on foot or by train or whatever,
using the phone networks. They haven't got any radios and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and they're in Nijmegen, and they're the guys holding the bridges. So when lots of kind of amazingly good-looking, square-jawed American paratroopers suddenly start running to them with bazookas and hand grenades and Tommy guns, they do what any ill-trained troops would do and just go hand a hop.
Yeah.
But
not all of them. But not all of them, because they're sticky enough to resist attempts to get to the bridge on the evening of the 17th. And this is what's so interesting. Because,
the main Nijmegen bridge.
Yeah, the main Nijmegen bridge. Yeah. Because what we talked to, I mean, so that was the first thing we did was look to the Grave Bridge and then
the one at
TZO. Bridge 7 and Bridge 10. Yeah. So there was a selection of bridges that 82nd could take over the canal, but because after all, the interesting thing, taking the coach, we kind of took the coach from Brussels to Nijmegen, and you kind of end up on a dual carriageway that runs parallel to Hell's Highway, to the road that 30 Corps Second Army took.
I love the fact that Horrocks called it the club route.
That's really great.
And the Screaming Eagles rechristen it Hell's Highway.
No, it's just. If you
want a contrast of different cultures.
If you want your contrast of styles and cultures, there it is. Well, I think we're taking the club route, oh boy. But I mean, it's
really funny.
But the old road is sort of you see the old road, and when we stood at the bridge at Grave, what was very interesting is you got to because it seems to be essentially unchanged, the landscape. You got a sense of what the issues are advancing up that road, because you can see an awfully long way. Across the polder, you've got raised roads, you've got strips of trees and strips of cover. So you could see that, if you're driving along a great thrust of armoured vehicles in a column along a road, and there's someone far enough away, with a gun powerful enough to fix you from far enough away that you can't do anything about it, say a tiger or a panther or something.
Yeah.
you're really, really, really exposed. And we got a glance of that at Grava.
Yes.
But the thing I think is really interesting that we ended up talking about a lot was the 406 Core Felt. They do this thing where basically they disrupt Gavin and what Gavin's trying to achieve at Nijmegen. Pretty effectively. And we talked about this idea that he's inside his OODA Loop, didn't we?
Yeah.
What's the OODA Loop? Which is your
Observe,
decision. Observe.
Orientate. Decide. Act.
And basically, what happened?
And this was designed by this was created by a fighter pilot, wasn't it? An American fighter pilot.
Yeah. Who came up with this way of, how you assess things and how you then make a decision and then how you act upon it, and or the idea that that's what you're trying to do when you're in command. And basically, Core felt that, and it's come, 406 Division, they put Gavin in a position where whatever he tries to do, they've actually already thought of it. And when he tries to get to the bridge, they've already thought, well, he's going for the bridge. And then they assess, well, he's clearly defending a drop zone on the other side of the Grossbeek Heights or a landing zone. So we need to attack that to disrupt him. So he's always robbing Peter to pay Paul to deal with these different things that the 406 are throwing at him. And that was really, really interesting, because they're not in the record, particularly in the historical record, because their officers were all killed. They don't write them. They don't write themselves.
What's the name? Schwerbening, wasn't it? Was
exactly
the general?
Exactly. They don't write themselves into the history books the way that Sepp Kraft does at Arnhem, where he writes himself into the history and makes sure he sort of is someone that, we talk about the Kraft blocking line, the Spindle blocking line in Arnhem, and 406 aren't in there. We
the virility of my troops won the day. Yeah,
but that led me to thinking.
Kraft, by the way.
That led me to thinking, Jim. Right, we talked a lot about Urquhart, flapping around like a great wet hen and all that sort of thing. When we got to Arnhem, Urquhart absenting himself from his headquarters, chasing 3 Power up the Tiger route, up the central route with Lathbury. But I ended up thinking it doesn't matter that all that stuff, because when we were standing on the battlefield, I was particularly disparaging about Urquhart, right, and very down on him and the decisions he makes. I think he could have stayed put. He could have stayed with his headquarters. He could have done anything. But the Germans were inside his OODA Loop regardless. And you look, all it takes to knock Gavin off his, it's not much. It's basically...
Well, it's worth just mentioning the setup. So you've got the low ground around Grave, and around bridge number 7. So you've got the River Mars, which turns into the Meuse, as in infamously at Sedan and all the rest of it, where the Germans overran the French in 1940, and at Dinant and stuff where Rommel was.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Mars-Waal Canal, which is no small canal, let me tell you.
It's a vast thing. Yeah.
What would you say? 60 yards wide, something like that. 70 yards wide. It's a decent chunk.
Yeah.
So you've got to take one bridge. There's 7, 8, 9, 10 along there. You only need one, and they get that immediately at Heumann.
Yeah.
Then you've got the River Waal, which is also incredibly wide. It basically becomes the Rhine when it joins what's known as the Upper Rhine, which is the river that goes through Arnhem. But the one at Arnhem is not as wide as the one at Waal at Nijmegen.
No.
But overlooking Nijmegen to the east and to the southeast is the the Grossbeek Heights.
Yeah.
And this is what Gavin, who is the commander of the 82nd Airborne, gets a little bit over obsessed with. And these heights we're not talking about massive heights, but they are a notable bit of high ground.
Yeah.
And they're undulating on the top. They're mainly forested. But on the other side is a big wide open space which runs down to the Reichswald, which is the border forest between Netherlands and Germany.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is on that far side that they put drop zone, landing zone T.
Yeah.
The Tango. And this is the one that Corps Felt, the 406th Infantry Division, this hastily put together kind of hopscotch of not very good troops, That's the one that's attacked. And also on the night of the 17th of September, D-Day for Operation Market Garden, troops from the 39th Replacement and Training Battalion are ordered up onto the Grossbeek Heights to infiltrate the American positions and confuse them. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether they're firing a machine gun or not firing a machine gun. The point is they're there, and the Americans have to
do something about them.
They have to kind of, winkle them out. But unbeknown to Korfeld, or maybe he's anticipated it, this is the point of obsession for Gavin. These heights, holding the high ground. I've got to hold the high ground. Yeah. And where does this come from? This comes from his experience with the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment in Sicily, where, they're going to the Piano Lupo, which is the high ground sort of northeast of Gela, where the main American landing is. And they're also, it's high ground in Normandy as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, we talked about this, endlessly when we were there. It's airborne operations are unconventional, but he's thinking conventionally is what's happening here.
Yes,
he's got his conventional infantryman head on, or divisional commander head on, and thinking I need high ground in order to be able to control the battlefield. But in order to do that, because he's robbing Peter to pay Paul, he can't do everything all at once, and so opts for the high ground over the bridge, which is his. So
he's interesting because his pre-drop plan is absolute number one priority: get the Grave Bridge, and a bridge across the Val Mars Canal, which they do.
Yeah.
The other equal top billing priority is to get the Grossbeek Heights, which they do. Yeah. The next priority, so target 3, is the Nijmegen Road Bridge.
Yeah.
But they've got to secure their base before they can do that, which means getting the high ground, getting those earlier bridges, because the problem is that if they don't get those early 2 bridges, then they won't be relieved by 30 Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they don't get the Nijmegen Bridge, British 1st Airborne won't be relieved by 30 Corps. Yeah. But at least the 82nd will be all right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so he's making sure he's got the entrance is open, but he hasn't sorted out the exit sort of thing. And so he can be relieved.
Entrance and what's it? Egress.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was fascinating though, because the high ground, it does dominate the area of the Grossbeek Heights. You see it from far off. It really does. So if that's how you're approaching the problem, you can see why he made that decision.
But the way they're landed. So you've got the 504th. They've been given a big job, which is to get the Grave Bridge and the Heumann Bridge, which they do. And they do it very, very quickly. Yeah. You've then got the 505th at the back of the Grossbeek Heights on the kind of southern side of it. Yeah. And there are clear routes around the Grossbeek Heights to the north between the River Val and the edge of the Grossbeek Heights, which is quite a comparatively steep escarpment. Yeah. And that's very close to the German border at Beek and Weiler and Ziflik, these little villages. Yeah. And then to the south, you've got Mook, the village of Mook, which is also a very obvious sort of access point. Yeah. And you've got the Mars. So you can see why the 505th is there, but that's given an awful lot for the 508th in the north. They've got to secure drop zone T, then secure Beek, then get into Nijmegen and take the road bridge. Yeah. So it's too much for one parachute infantry regiment. The problem is what they don't do is they never split up the parachute infantry regiments. Yeah. So although one battalion of the 505th is landing on drop zone T, each parachute infantry regiment is given its own set of tasks. Yeah. So it's not like you could go, okay, well, why don't we have one battalion of the 508th go straight for the bridge, and one from the 504th in drop zone O just go hell for leather for the bridge. Then you've got two battalions or whatever, that's 4 companies going hell for leather for Nijmegen, and the rest will just have to make do and do the best they possibly can. Yeah. And they don't do that, and that's because the Grossbeek Heights have also been highlighted in the early planning for Comet, which is the precursor, which has been poured over by General Urquhart, obviously, because Comet is just going to be 1st Airborne Division. Yeah, and his intel is passed on to Gavin, isn't it? Yeah, well, and it just confirms is already his way of thinking, which is high ground trumps everything.
Well, and after all, Market Garden is Super Comet. It's what they start calling it to start with, because it's an upgraded version of Comet, because you're worried about what the enemy can do at the different places like the Grossbeek Heights as well as at Arnhem. It's upgraded because of the German presence. So you can see that. Oh, well, in which case we better deal with that German presence. But I mean, I was struck at Nijmegen. I was struck by the distances, which are vast. He's really spread. The butter's spread very thin on the toast, isn't it?
Yes.
It's ink spots. Really,
yeah, it's wartime ration butter, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ink. They're ink spots, really, rather than a contiguous divisional area. Is the interesting thing. I mean, I found all of that really, really fascinating, and the sort of that in the end and we went to where the scene of the river crossing that they do on that they end up having to do in assault boats. Once Second Army have arrived on the Wednesday, isn't it? They do. We went to the site of that, and you think, God, bloody hell, this is really, really hardcore, and this is the situation they've got themselves into. The only way to get to take the bridge is to assault it by crossing the river.
Well, yeah, and it's so frustrating, isn't it? Because two companies go forward to Nijmegen on the night of the 17th, but one of them gets lost because and let's be fair. It's dark. They've got quite a long way to go. Yeah. There's blackout in Nijmegen. They've never been there before. And studying of aerial maps and all the rest of it and aerial photographs only take you so far. They get lost. So it ends up being just one company going forward. And as we know, companies going forward are, 100 men or whatever. It's not it's two platoons. Yeah. Which are reduced in size. And, you're talking about, 40 men. Yeah. Actually doing in the lead, if that. Yeah. And they've been warned that there are potentially SS troops around. As it turns out, there aren't. Yeah. But when they hear troops up ahead, they immediately assume they're SS and think, oh, okay. And they take the post office, which is what they've been told where the detonating device is. Yeah. And they've got that. So they think, okay, well, to a large extent, we don't need to worry about the bridge blowing up anymore because we've got the detonating stuff. Yeah. And so Gavin thinks he's got a bit more time on his hands than he actually has. Yeah, yeah. And the following morning, they're all set to kind of, right, we'll really go for the bridge. So you can understand the process of pulling the troops back on the first night. Yeah. Because you think, well, we've got time tomorrow. We've still got that window tomorrow where we can go in force. But then the 406 do that counterattack on drop zone T. Yep. And that has to be seen off because you've got the second lift that afternoon. So you can understand Gavin's decision-making process. Yeah. So consequently, it's not until the early afternoon that that's secure. And then he's thinking, right, okay, I'm going to go all out for the bridge now. By which point Browning sort of goes, who's dropped with his core headquarters completely needlessly, then throws a kind of spanner in the works by going, I'm not sure. I think we should maybe wait for 30 quarter turn.
Yeah, although I think that's not necessarily a bad decision because Browning's thinking, wait for the muscle. If you
but in that moment,
because I know we know that that's the moment where it's in the balance and
of course
vigorous action might have enabled them to take the bridge then and there. But you can also see why Browning might think that.
You absolutely can.
Because if they think they ran into SS at the bridge, which is after all why they didn't bother going in, they surely assume there's more of them there by now. And so
there were. And there were. And by the time they would have, if they'd launched it that evening, at say 6 o'clock, which is what Gavin, roughly around then, Gavin was planning, they would have come up against the 10th SS. Yeah. So, I agree. It's not quite as bad a decision as, retrospectively it seems. Yeah. The problem is for the disruptive work of the 406 has it. I think it's less than taking it on the night of the 17th that's the problem. Yeah. I think it's the missed opportunity of taking it on the morning of the 18th, which is really the crux of it. Yeah. Because that's what he's planning to do, and he can't because he has to deal with his other problem. And that's indicative of the fact that you're too thinly spread. There just isn't quite enough to do what you want to do. Yeah, and it's the tyranny of the second lift. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas if they hadn't had to protect that, they could have just gone straight, they could have gone straight for it.
Exactly, and this, after all, is the principal lesson that's then taken to varsity: is you only do what you can do in one lift. You only land who you can land in one lift. Yeah. You don't wait and defend your landing zones, your drop zones.
But my conclusion of the 82nd Airborne is successfully fulfilled the plan, but it was the wrong plan.
Yeah, there we go. Well, we're going to take a break, and then inevitably we will move on to Arnhem, which I touched, because I tried to move things onto Arnhem straight away earlier, but Jim wouldn't have it.
No,
we'll see.
We got to deal with Jim Gavin. Got to deal with him.
We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. Before we dive deep into the swirling whirlpool of opinion, this July, many of you may be aware of this, but maybe not. And anyway, we want to nudge you if you are and you haven't made your mind up yet. This July, we're holding our second annual summer festival. It's called We Have Ways Fest, and it takes place from Friday, July the 22nd to Sunday, July the 24th. That's the 22nd of July to the 24th. We've got 3 tents with all of the best Second World War historians coming in to talk about their specialisms. So, Max Hastings on Winston Churchill, Rana Mitter on the war in China. And if you've heard Rana on the podcast, I mean, that's going to be fantastic. Katrin Himmler on being a descendant of a senior Nazi and carrying that surname. 40 speakers in all, covering all sorts of topics. Plus, we've got a 50-plus military vehicles collection, including a T-34, Sherman tanks, a Centaur, a Grant. Oh, we got a Grant. Oh, I love a Grant. Plus, we'll be firing a 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun at the end of every evening, with glasses in hand.
Searchlight this, yeah.
And a searchlight. So we can pick out some poor benighted duck or something in the night sky and give him the fright of his life. There'll be lots to eat and drink, and it's a great way to spend time with like-minded people. A perfect summer weekend, I would argue. For details on speakers, hardware, and how to get tickets, go to wehavewaysfest.co.uk. That's wehavewaysfest.co.uk. Buy your tickets. We'll see you there, I hope. Right. Now, so on to Arnhem. So we discussed all of this, and were very much coach bound for a lot of the first sort of segment of the tour. And then we went to Arnhem, or rather we didn't go to Arnhem. We went out to Hilsum, which is where the Airborne Memorial is, which is essentially where it's kind of
southern end of Drop Zone X, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's proximate to the 2nd Parachute Battalion RV, from where they then set off to get to the Arnhem bridges at Arnhem, because there were 2 after all.
Yeah,
and we walked that sort of kind of 7.5 miles, wasn't it?
Yep, the Lion Route, as it was called. Lion
Route, which is the southernmost.
Exactly the same route. Exactly the same route.
Yeah, the oldest road along into Arnhem. And I mean, you know, it took us 3 hours, didn't it? And obviously we weren't whip fit, paras, highly motivated elite troops. We were mainly middle-aged blokes,
but we didn't have any enemies shooting at us. But then on the other hand, there weren't that many enemies shooting at people on the line route either.
Yes, but you know what? I've been back and had a look at that, and I think what's quite interesting is they did encounter a fair deal of resistance. But it's how they chose to deal with those contacts. And what's really interesting is 2 Para are kind of under strength. He's only got 480 riflemen, so 484 riflemen. Yeah. He's not at the strength that the other 2 parachute battalions are, and certainly not got the
freedom of poverty.
Well, there's a bit of that, but also, you know, Frost is known as a thruster, right? Which is why he's been told to go get the bridge, and his plan goes wrong because, after all, Victor Dover's company is supposed to go over the railway bridge and then approach the road bridge from the south, while the rest of the battalion goes around the top. And that's an important. That's really interesting that they are thinking in terms of taking the bridge from both sides, but they're just that bit too slow to the railway bridge because it's blown, and they don't get that company over the bridge to tab up south to the town. So, but they nevertheless improvise, change the plan, and push on because Frost and his guys are thrusters. You know, their thing is that they won't stop. And there's a brilliant account of Frost taking the entire battalion in through someone's house, through a couple of gardens, then back into another house and back out, going round the high ground, avoiding the gunfire from the high ground at Danebrink.
At Danebrink, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, an old lady protesting is basically the entire or two entire companies and headquarters come through the gardens in the house. And literally he does a sort of dog leg.
So that they avoid the direct fire from the high ground.
Yeah. And he's thinking like that, and he's moving on.
Lieutenant Kane, isn't it? Peter Kane.
That's right.
He's the guy his platoon is sent off to.
Yes, up the railway
with Danebrink.
Yeah.
Where the twins from
the grown-up
Devon, although someone on Twitter said they weren't from Devon, they were from Cornwall.
Cornwall, yeah. Anyway, but it's really, but what's really interesting is that and they run into an armoured car. They go get the £6, and the armoured car decides discretion is the better part of valour, and disappears after the Oosterbeek lug, after the station. And I think it's really, really interesting because what Frost does, and it's one of the things we talked about a lot was that you've got contrasting terrain for everyone to have to deal with. So some people are fighting in woods, some people are fighting in wide open spaces, and some of it's built up area. And what Frost does is he uses the built up area to his advantage by mouse holing through houses and gardens and all this sort of stuff. And that's how he gets to the bridge. Yet one para, and we went up to the one para route, Leopard, the top route, where they get entangled in the woods, and it's this whole business of a couple of guys get hurt, a couple of people get lost.
Before you know it, they've spent 4 hours there doing just attriting and getting nowhere.
And your company that was 120 men is now 90.
Yeah.
And there's just people being peeled off bit by bit. And what's really interesting is one para don't stop all night. They turn around, they go back, and they try and go all the way back down from their northern route to get on the southern route, on the Lion route. Whereas it's 3 para that stop in Oosterbeek at the moment where stopping is probably critical to the whole thing. But even and that's we took part of the picture there is that Major General Urquhart has gone forward to find out what's happening and is attached to Lieutenant Colonel Fitch's headquarters with the brigadier, with Lathbury, who's also gone forward to find out what his brigade's doing. And that arguably is probably why they halt for the night, because they got the general with them and the brigadier, and
they're thinking about Hopkinson the year before.
Exactly, it's all
going forward, getting himself killed.
Exactly,
and as if to prove the point, as you pointed out when we were there, General Cussin, who is the German commander of Arnhem, gets himself killed by British paratroopers that afternoon, doing exactly that.
Yeah, because he's rushing about,
beetling around on his own.
Yeah, trying to find out what's happening or speak to someone. But I still think when you look at what the 406 do in Nijmegen and how they basically keep Gavin off balance long enough to make a critical difference to battle, and then they're annihilated and the SS turn up and everyone thinks, oh, it's the SS that fought the Nijmegen battle and held up the 82nd. It's Dad's army that the German Dad's army that kind of do it in Nijmegen. I think, and I've been really, really thinking about this an awful lot since we got back. I mean, I really have, because I think no matter what Urquhart did, the Germans were inside his decision loop. They were inside his ability to react to them, and inside it, they were inside the British Arnhem plan to the point where I think there's nothing he could have done to make it go differently. The more I think about it.
I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think the whole plan is predicated on the assumption that there's going to be hardly any enemy troops there. So they start having cute plans about taking the high ground and all the rest of it. And they're also thinking a bit like Gavin, get the high ground, then you've got firm base, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what they should have done is said, a much better plan would be, right, the moment you get off, just everyone head for the bridge.
Yeah.
Get there as quickly as you possibly can. Line route's quick, it's the best route. As soon as if you come into any opposition, get out of the way, move around the house, just get out of the way. Just whatever happens, just get quickly to the bridge. Yeah. You don't need to assemble and form up in battalions because they're paratroopers. They know what they're doing. You can assemble at the bridge. Yeah. If you've got 2/3 of that force, of those three battalions down at the bridge straight away, and you'd even got there an hour earlier than they did, it would have made all the difference.
Yeah, I know, but I
Then
think
all they got to do is hold on to it, because the thing is, once they're there,
Frost has the reputation as the thruster. The others don't. Why not?
Why not? They're
Well, exactly.
They're paratroop battalion commanders.
Exactly.
So why have you got those men in that position?
Exactly. So there's something else going on that's making the jelly wobble here, as well as the.
Why haven't you got? Do you think Hill would have faffed around?
No, I don't. Or Pearson.
Pearson.
No.
Would they have faffed about?
I don't know, but that's. But then Dobie going north. He's not faffing about. He's trying to carry out his plan. And his misfortune is he's going north and trying to come in round the town north of the railway line, and the railway line dictates the territory, dictates the ground so much. He's trying to go around to the north, and his misfortune is he bumps into the first Germans to arrive coming from elsewhere, basically, doesn't he? That's his misfortune. So he's. I've really been.
I think they're right that they focused on the bridges much more than 82nd Airborne do.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think it's so the principle is right. I just think it's poorly executed.
Yeah.
And I think they're too slow off those drop zones, because they get there and it all seems nice and quiet and there's no one around, and just huge great open fields. And they think, oh, this is a cakewalk. No one's around here. And they should have all known that the moment they land, they've just got to get going.
Yeah.
Don't fuck them. Don't faff around. Speed of maneuver is absolutely key to the whole thing.
But
it's a coup de man operation.
I know, but you look at. I mean, because the other thing, one of the other things that was really fantastic is we walked Lion Route on the Tuesday night, and Footsore and Weary went to the pub, and which had a predictable outcome. And then on Wednesday, we visited the various locations of the battlefield, and the first one we went out to where the drop zones and landing zones are, and when you stand and look at these spectacular, vast, defined, wide open spaces, you go, well, okay, it's completely understandable why the air planners would pick these. It's obvious, isn't it? Why wouldn't you? If you're trying to mitigate risk, and also if you're trying to make sure that you land your airborne soldiers in the right place so they can form up and then approach battle in an orderly manner, which is what they're desperate to do, because every single parachute operation up to that point they haven't been able to do because the drops have been disastrously scattered and all that sort of thing. You stand in those landing zones, you go, well, I'd choose these. That's what's so mad about it, because they are the single thing. The one thing anyone knows is that the landing zones are too far away. That's the problem. The landing zones are too far away. It's the one thing everyone knows. But then look at how suitable they are.
Well, yeah, and also I don't think they necessarily they are. I mean, drop zone X, I don't think is particularly too far away. No. I mean, we did it in 3 hours. 2nd Battalion did it in 5.
Yeah.
They were down by 2:30. Why? I just don't understand why they're just so slow getting off, getting going.
Well, Lathbury holds them for an hour.
What's that all about?
I mean, I don't know. I think
if you're a coup de man operation and the whole thing is surprise and speed and the initial moments, what the heck are you doing faffing about?
Yeah, well, that's
just get on with it.
Your USP is that you've arrived out of nowhere, so you should make the most.
And also,
of it.
it's not as though this whole kind of forming up and assembling stuff is just. I just think it's absolutely nonsense. These are paratroopers. They're supposed to use their own initiative.
But they're getting to fight their fantasy battle where they can form up, and that's what's happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. But in their obsession for order after what everyone's forgetting is that actually, despite all the chaos on D-Day, they were remarkably successsul. The 6th Airborne, they blew up all the bridges across the Dives. They secured the bridges across the Caen Canal and the River Orne. Yeah. The 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne did everything that they needed to do. There was absolutely no problem about it whatsoever.
Yeah. Anyway.
And troops were mixed up and they were fine. If there's one thing that proved how well trained they were, it was their ability to operate in ad hoc formations. I mean, after all, Easy Company and the Breakout Manor and those guns, that wasn't entirely Easy Company. There was someone from D Company, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Is that what seems to then what then seems to happen is then when they try improvising, it compounds the problems.
But they're trying to improvise in an organised way rather than just doing it. All you got to do is just get to the bridges.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, doesn't matter. Chaos will it'll be chaos. That's what James Hill said.
Yeah, he says chaos will reign. That's right.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're paratroopers. We can deal with that. Just get to the bridge. That's all you got to do.
I mean, I don't know. I still
think daylight. It's not like it's darkness. It's daylight.
I know it's daylight, but this is the point. Is that it is First Airborne have got it in their heads that they want to do things in an orderly manner because.
Well, they've just got that wrong. That's the point.
Well, I know they have.
They're trying to be too orderly.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if it had worked, we would be going on about how brilliant they were, rather than sort of muffed opportunities.
Yes, but it was only going to work if Arnhem was completely undefended, or defended by kind of sixth-rate troops.
Yeah,
which it wasn't.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, one of the things. We talk a lot about walking the ground, don't we? And on this podcast,
and we did.
And we walked all the ground, and we walked the perimeter on the. It was the last thing we did. Basically, it was walk the entire length of the Oosterbeek perimeter. And what's striking about that is it's not really what's it defending. Itself, basically, isn't it? They're just defending themselves. There's no ground of any significance. They lose the Westerboing high ground and the ferry with it.
Yep.
It's
that rather proves my point about the bridge. You don't need the high ground.
No, I know.
If they could survive all those days in the perimeter, on diminishing ration, diminishing ammo, diminishing numbers of troops, then with pretty much full strength airborne division or a decent chunk of it at the bridge, they should have been absolutely fine. Yeah.
Well, even a whole brigade.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, But this is so what, on Twitter the other day, Jim, you tweeted, I've figured it out. I've got it all worked out. Enlighten us.
I was being ironic, but obviously I haven't got it all figured out. It's just the whole thing about it. It's just so frustrating, isn't it? Because you've got these amazing troops. You've got lots of incredibly proficient people. It gets so far. I mean, I think on one level it doesn't. It's still a mountain to climb. On another level, when you look at it, it is just that one bridge that isn't taken.
Yeah.
The bridge too far. But actually, what I've cut, there's a lot of historians who would say, it never had a chance. It was madcap. I mean, and PCA's in this camp. He thinks it was bonkers. It couldn't be sustained even if they did get the Arnhem Bridge. What are they going to do? But I mean, it's interesting that they never lose the ground they take. The only ground they lose is that tiny little kind of non-pocket in Arnhem itself. But they get the whole of the island pretty much, and they don't lose that. There's fighting on the island, of course, but it's a small bridgehead by the Germans. And they don't lose that. They don't lose Nijmegen. They don't lose the Grossbeek Heights. They hold on to Beek. They hold on to Mook. It's there for the launch pad for Veritable. So, I think it could have been exploited. And of course, had it been successful, then you would shove more troops into it, wouldn't you? You would divert First Army and all the rest of it.
Well, yes, it would completely change the complexion of.
So one of Peter's big arguments is that you couldn't possibly, even if you won the, you achieved what you needed to achieve in Market Garden, you then couldn't exploit from it because it was unsustainable. But you would veer westwards and take Rotterdam, wouldn't you? And the Germans would be forced to either be encircled or bug out.
Yeah.
And then you could exploit eastwards through round the top. So, I think it could have led to a different outcome or a shortening of the war. I don't know. I mean, it's a horrible what if, and obviously we don't do what ifs on the show. But I do think it could have worked. Yeah.
But this is why people revisit it, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
That's the truth. And I almost, when I read books about it, I'm almost willing them to get it right this time. They never do.
Yes, exactly. So one
Anyway.
day.
There will be more of this in our live stream for our Patreons tonight.
Just in case you haven't had enough of it.
Just in case you hadn't
already.
enough of it. And we look forward to the sidebar shame with people asking us probing questions and trying to derail this our sort of weirdly buoyant view of the Operation Market Garden. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, we have Ways Fest 22nd of July to the 24th of July, a weekend of talks, tanks and tankards. Basically, a very agreeable summer's weekend to be had near Silverstone. You have been listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray and James Holland. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.